Good afternoon, everybody. Happy St. Patrick's Day.
Hey,
Welcome. Yes, thank you for joining us on a fun day.
Monday holiday. Joining.
yes, on this lovely St. Patty's Day.
The sun is shining. Wearing green.
Yeah, I'm wearing red.
Yes. Thanks, Kelly. You too. More people are coming
I
in.
love all that spirit, that holiday spirit you have. Love it.
Me too. I love it too. And it's Monday. Hope you guys had a good Monday.
Yes, happy St. Patrick's Day.
Nice to see everybody.
Just days away from spring.
Yeah, I didn't think about that.
Yep.
Some of you are even on spring break this week, I bet. I think there's some of our state is on this week and some is next week. You all are in store for a break, which is wonderful.
That is. Although it snowed by my house the other day. I was like, what happened?
It's about to snow on Thursday here, or have a wintry mix.
Oh, okay.
Of course, it's the one day I have to be traveling, but it's on.
People are still kind of trickling in. I know it's exactly 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock, depending on where you are. So we will get started in just a minute, just letting some people in, and they're kind of just saying hello, which is nice. I like this group. And if you're new here, I am Alana. Hi, Gail and Nikki and I are going to be doing this training today. Nikki's going to start us off, but just wanted to say hello, and please use the chat as as questions, comments. We love it when you guys do that. It's really helpful for us so we can get some feedback. We get to see what your questions are, and you guys get to talk to each other. So please keep doing that. You guys do a great job with that.
Yes, we've been so motivated by the awesome conversation you all have been having so far during the series. I can't believe we've made it so quickly to session 4 already. So we're happy to spend another session with you all. All right, and we are close to the number of participants who signed up. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Welcome everybody and happy St. Patrick's Day. We are here today for paraprofessional training session number 4. And our focus for today is going to be modifications and accommodations. So we're going to spend some time today looking into the nitty-gritty of those, and we'll have some fun with it as we go. We encourage you to use the chat as much as possible. Please continue hopping in, putting your thoughts in the chat. That's okay. You can stay right there, Gail. I was just about to ask you to scoot there anyway. So say, please continue to put your thoughts in the chat, and we have a quick chat for you to start with. We're just wondering today, how do you get to know a student's strengths and needs? So accommodations and modifications are all about meeting our students where they're at and supporting them in the way that they need individually. So how do you get to know your students' strengths and needs? So if you have if you have a great way to do that, we'd love for you to share it in the chat, and we'll be sharing those out with you. So please take a moment and put those into the chat. Any way you get to know a student's strengths or needs. And Alana got us started off. She said, does anyone use interest surveys? Observing behaviors, love it. I see so many of you typing. Thank you for having your cameras on and being so interactive. I can tell you're ready to go today. Yeah, thank you. Anne shared Observe and give them some space to demonstrate. So really giving them the opportunity to show what they know and to show where they feel most comfortable or maybe a little uncomfortable. We really let them take the lead. Great idea. Morning meetings, I love those. I love those. I bet yours was a hit this morning, Paula, with your great outfit. I bet your morning meeting was so festive today. Yes, Leslie, I love how you come back to this IEP. First, I read their IEPs, so you get to know them through the IEP first, and then also in person there. Thank you. Building that relationship, watching their interactions to see where their comfort level is. Spending time with them, getting to know them. But these are all such great ways because we need to get to know our students as people. I love how Joyce just shared getting to know how they interact with peers. So how they share with each other. Good, great ideas. Lots of conversations, lots of observation. We know that part of being able to provide accommodations and modifications that are appropriate for our students and their needs really hinges on being able to know those strengths and needs. So we have to know our students at this really personal and individual level in order to help get them what they need and provide the support that they need during their school day and then beyond as well. We'll talk a little bit about today. So Gail, would you mind scooting forward for me?
Absolutely.
Thank you. So during today's session, we are going to spend some time distinguishing between modifications and accommodations in the classroom setting. So really talking about the differences between the two and how each are implemented, as well as aligning student support with the needs of students and the curriculum. So we'll want to make sure that every support that we choose to put in place for a student really meets their needs in that individual way. And then finally, identify and plan to apply common classroom accommodations. So we'll be identifying those accommodations, but also helping give you ideas for how you can apply those with your students individually in those classrooms in the most effective and efficient way possible. So as we go through that, please continue sharing your ideas, sharing the great things that are happening in your classroom setting and the great ideas that you have that can help benefit all of you from around the state as well. And we have put together for you a Padlet of resources. If you've been with us through the entire series, this is the same Padlet of resources. It's got everything on there for you. But keep in mind that our slides, videos, anything that you see as part of these sessions is going to be there for you. And you can use the link at the bottom, also linked on our IEPTA Center website, or you can use the QR code on your phone to go directly to this Padlet. So as always, the foundational piece of this paraprofessional training is to kind of keep in mind that all of our students are general education students first. So all of our students have the access to that gen ed curriculum. They have to have the access to the gen ed curriculum, and they must be educated in their least restrictive environment. So gen ed first, and then followed by the supports that they need. Paraprofessionals, those of you here in this room today, you are what helps make this happen. It would be impossible to do without the supportive environment that you create for students and without all of the amazing ways that you are able to implement accommodations and modifications to support our students. You scoot forward for me one more. Thank you, Gail. So throughout this process, I know these slides are looking familiar. We just want to make sure that we're addressing them for anyone who maybe missed one or a couple. But more than anything, we want to kind of talk about where we've been so far. We shared with you in that first session that when it came to special education, we know there were certain things that we agreed that paraprofessionals need to know, understand, and be able to do in the setting. And today we're going to focus on that third one down, accommodations. Who, what, when, where are these things going to happen and under what conditions? So today's entire session is going to really dig into accommodations and modifications and how we make those happen and how we make them happen consistently in the best interest of the students throughout the classroom and throughout the day, throughout the school day and within the classroom evening. All right, and one more, Gail. Thank you. All right, so as we look at these ideas, accommodation, modifications, and the IEP, how are all of these things related? That all of these accommodations and modifications are listed in the IEP, and they can be found in that IEP at a glance document. That's usually the shorter version that doesn't have all of the nitty gritty of it. The full IEP has lots of nitty gritty and years worth of notes. The IEP at a glance document gives you as paraprofessionals streamlined information about what needs to be happening consistently for these students. So accommodations and modifications are in there, and these are legal responsibilities for all people.
No, I'm not doing that.
Sorry, I had a question. So these are legal responsibilities for us to follow as professional educators. So paraprofessionals, teachers, special education teachers, everyone is going to follow the accommodations and modifications. They have to be implemented with consistency. And you'll notice there, students are able to use accommodations in class and on standardized assessment. So both of those things are true. But one important point here that we wanted to make sure that everyone heard was that accommodations that are listed for students there for a standardized test need to be implemented on a consistent basis in their general education classroom and special education classroom settings. So this can't just be a one-off where the first time they've seen a calculator is when they're using it on a standardized test. This has to be, these accommodations have to be embedded into their everyday classroom practice and behaviors as well.
And the other thing I will say about accommodations is that if the testing accommodations, you can have other accommodations outside of the ones for testing, because if there is a math test and it doesn't allow a calculator, that doesn't mean you can't use the calculator in the classroom. So just keep that in mind.
Thank you, Gail. And then, so what I want to give you all a moment after kind of all of that information, I want you to take a look at this photograph. And if your goal is to get to the top of the stairs, how are you getting to the top there? So take a look at all of the options that you have and choose the way that you would get to the top. And if you're willing, please share in the chat. What's your plan to get to the top of that? Also, feel free to unmute anytime and share if you'd like to just share instead of typing.
Hi, this is Leslie. I am a direct person, and so for me personally, I would choose to go straight up the stairs, but I do understand the comparison, or I don't know the word I'm looking for, that with some students, you know, you might have to go back and forth and revisit some things.
Straight up the stairs. Now, are you a straight up the middle kind of girl, Leslie, or would you be near the hand railings on either side?
No, I'd go straight up the middle for just
Straight
me.
up the middle.
Yeah.
Any other ways to get up the stairs anyone would like to share? I know I have a 10-year-old who would love to see sort of the ramps that are here, because I bet she'd be doing backflips all the way up or all the way down. She'd be doing some kind of gymnastics. She would see this and be like, thank goodness I don't have to climb the stairs. I could do cartwheels all the way up this ramp back and forth. And she would just be happy as a little clam. Yeah, I see. Kelly, thank you for sharing. She said I would use the handrails. Alana said I need some steps, so I would take the stairs, but then if I got too tired, I'd switch to the ramp. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm with Alana. It's like you don't know how many sets of steps there are. So I would kind of judge like, okay, I'm going to go up a step and then I'm going to use the ramp, and then I'll go up some more steps, then use the ramp. So depending on how many sections there are.
Yeah. I'll also share, I have a kindergarten daughter who would probably just walk back and forth on each individual step just to make sure it took us 3 hours to get to the top. She likes picking the longest way anywhere. When we consider the picture like that, Leslie said, I would go straight up the stairs, but I understand that our students have to take all of these different ways. What we know is when it comes to accessing the curriculum, if our goal is to get them to the top of the stairs, we have to consider all of the possible ways that we can get our students there and all of the possible supports that we can put in place to guide them as they go to the top of the steps. So there's just so many options and so many correct ways to get there, and so many ways that we can support them in that goal of getting to the top. So when we look at that, I just want you to kind of think of what kinds of supports do you currently put in place for your students that help them to get to the top of the stairs being that gen ed, those curriculum goals that you have for your students. And Gail, I know we have to change the settings on the video, so I'm okay to keep talking if you want to change the settings.
Okay, so you just keep talking while I work.
Yes, I'm going to keep talking and let Gail change some settings so that we're hoping this will help you all see the video a little better. But one thing we want you to consider is the way that you're helping your students get to the top, to the success goal, their academic goal or their behavior goal. And there's lots of different ways that you can do it. And it might look a little different every day, where I share with you that one day we would go straight up the steps. Another day you might need the handrail. And so when we look at it, it could be based on interest. Perhaps a student's reading a story about baseball and they're very interested in it. So they need fewer supports because there's greater motivation, versus another day where they might need more supports because they have no interest in, maybe the topic of dinosaurs. So we have to be able to say either way, we're going to get to successful reading comprehension, but on a day you're less interested in the topic, we might need to provide additional supports such as graphic organizers or things like that. So just providing all of the different opportunities, different ways to get up the stairs. I really love this particular image because it helps us think about all the ways we could get to what our students need, their ultimate goal, but that we can have so many choices in how we get there. All right, so when Gail has the video ready, we're going to watch a brief video with Dr. Shelley Moore. And Gail, I can pull it up too, so don't worry if it's not working. I've got it ready on my end also. And Gail, you're muted, so I can't hear you. I'm sorry. We're going to watch a brief video by Dr. Shelley Moore, and she talks a little bit about the word support and where it currently kind of stands in education. I'm guessing that many of you as paraprofessionals, when it says support in a student's IEP, it's assumed that you are the support. The support is that a para is in the room. And we're going to talk about how you are supportive, but not necessarily the only support, or just the support in general. Excuse my wording there. So I am going to try to share this. Maybe Gail, or you've got it. No? Okay. All right. I got it. I apologize. Hopefully you all can see and hear this.
Wix, one platform, any website, unlimited creation.
Welcome to 5 More Minutes, useful videos in about 5 minutes that support the teaching and learning of all students. I'm your host, Dr. Shelley Moore, and today's episode is called People Are Not Supports. We all know that there are certain terms in education that get thrown around a lot and over time may become contaminated because they lose their meaning. One of those words is the word support. I hear it all the time. I need more support. I need another EA. Friends, EAs are not supports because people are not supports. People can be supportive, and some may think this is just semantics, but it's actually really important to know the difference. Okay, let us clarify. To understand what a support is and why an EA is not one, is we need to understand 4 words: needs, supports, strategies, and resources. Okay, we're gonna walk through this together. So if you know me at all, you know that I can kind of be a hot mess. My executive functioning skills are not a strength for me at all. I lose my keys every day. I'm always late. I forget everything, including forgetting to pick up my dog on multiple occasions. Executive functioning is a needs area for me, and it isn't something that I can just eliminate from my life. It's just something that I have to navigate. And it becomes more or less possible to navigate when I have supports in place. One support that I use is a visual checklist: keys, wallet, cell phone. I post it right by my door to remind me before I leave the house that I have everything I need. I also have an Apple tag in my wallet, so if I forget it somewhere, I can find it again. Honestly, before the AirTag, I would lose my bank card all the time. I'm not even kidding you. My issue number 74. Visual checklists, AirTags, these are supports or tools that help increase my independence while navigating my executive functioning needs. Now, I also live on an island and rely on a ferry, which means I miss the ferry because I have a hard time getting out of the door of my house. But I mean, who doesn't? My wife actually taught me a good strategy for this one. Our ferry runs about every hour, so she's like, hey Shelly, how about you leave on the time of the ferry before the ferry that you actually want to catch? And then you have lots of buffer time and maybe even time to get a coffee. This strategy is an action that I take so that I can increase my independence while navigating my executive functioning needs. Are you picking up a pattern? Supports are tools and strategies are actions. But in order to not lose my wallet, I need an AirTag. In order to not miss the ferry, I needed my wife to teach me a strategy. In order to have a visual checklist, I need a color printer. These are resources. Resources are what we need so that we can access the supports and the strategies. They're the people, the time, and the funding needed to access the tools we need and the actions we have to take to navigate our needs. Resources cannot eliminate a need because needs are just a part of who we are. In education, however, resources are used often to try and eliminate needs that students have. Do you know how many resources are used, for example, to try and stop students from feeling anxious or mad or frustrated or being an introvert? Another important part here is that although my wife taught me a ferry catching strategy, she did not catch the ferry for me. Do you see the difference? Often when we jump straight to a person being the support, we skip what the person can do to facilitate and teach the use of supports, and then we decrease the independence instead of increasing it. In this way, resources are only as good as the plan we have to respond to our needs. Without the plan, or without knowing what our needs are, resources may not be used optimally or lead to decreased independence in our students and in ourselves. Now, don't get me wrong. Of course we need more people, just like we need more time and more funding in the education system, absolutely. It's also really important though to look at how resources are being used. Are they being used to try and fix or change needs? Or are they being used to teach students how to navigate and respond to their needs? Knowing our needs, making a plan for the supports and strategies that we can use, and having access to resources to ensure that supports and strategies are available is important to be moving inclusion forward. Asking for more resources though isn't enough, and sometimes even gets in the way for the goals we're trying to achieve. So here's our challenge. How do we advocate for more resources and ensure that they're being used to support needs-based planning that articulates the tools and actions needed for students to gain independence, to gain self-determination, and as a part of an inclusive and diverse community? Thank you for watching today's episode of 5 More Minutes. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and give it a share with your friends. Stay tuned to learn more about the research and resources that align with the big ideas from this video, including discussion questions, a practical strategy, and the 5 More Minute podcast. See you next time.
So we're going to change some settings back here so we don't get that black box across the screen. I'm sorry if every time somebody came in, you got a black box across your screen. But one of the things I want you kind of to think about is, how does this align with your current practice when it comes to accommodations and modifications, the way that you support students in the classroom? Did Dr. Shelley Moore's definition of supports align with your current practice? Maybe you could give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down in the chat. Does it kind of align with where you are? Or I see lots of, Leslie, you have like a kind of in there. Maybe it's sort of a vision of where we would like to be. I love the visual schedule. Great. Yeah, so we know that there are lots of supports and resources available for our students within the classroom. We also know that we're always looking for more, right? We always want to do more for our students. But Dr. Shelley Moore reminds us that we can create this inclusive environment by really giving our students the opportunity to have independence, but in a supportive environment with the supports that we put in place. And I'm going to turn it over to Alana to discuss accommodations that we can put in place for our students.
Thanks. And I really liked in her video that it talked about we don't jump right to the person. So we're trying not to jump right to the paraprofessional to be that support. We're trying to be the person to teach the students before. I think that was my aha in that video. I really like that part of it. You know, we don't need more people. I mean, we do need more people, but we need more students that are able to take those skills for themselves, and kind of we get to teach those skills. And then I think that was kind of a nice part in that. So thanks for you guys' chats and everything as you're talking about that. All right. So some resources that we can use. I'm going on here from here, Nick. That you guys have talked about in this chat, the visual checklist, and we talk about us as paraprofessionals. We can give them visual checklists, but also have them come up with them themselves as well. Visuals to remind students to press submit after work completion. This is something that I had with a student that he did the work a lot, but he would just forget to press submit after he was done. So really that little part was just, okay, we got done with this. At the end of his Canvas, it would say, remember to press submit, and then he'd have to check it off and then he would press it, because he would get the work done, but he would forget to hand it in, however that looked. Anchor charts, those are some resources that students could use. All students, again, we're talking about resources that help all students. Graphic organizers, like Nikki talked about this, graphic organizers are great when students do not know how to start an assignment, or they just need some scaffolded support for those. And we've talked about this in some of our other paraprofessional series, but those are helpful to come up with for the student. And another idea is not just to give them a graphic organizer, but really give them a choice. So how does your brain work best? I'm going to show you 3 different graphic organizers. What way do you think that you can organize it? What would work best for you? Some students have a really hard time using those Venn diagrams because there's 2 circles and then the one in the middle, right? And sometimes some kids, that's too much for them. It's too much. It's too visual. They might need to use a T-chart. Maybe that just works better in their brain. So if you can think about asking the teacher, like, what kind of graphic organizers are there? Can I have a few options? And then teach your students how to use those options. That would be a good idea to help those kids, because giving everybody the same graphic organizer might not work, but giving them an option and hearing their input is helpful, because my brain works differently than Nikki's and differently than Gail's. We might need to organize our work in different ways. Virtual digital agendas to write down assignments. My son had, in middle school, they give you a actual paper pencil agenda. I don't know if you guys use those with your students. He doesn't write anything down in the, so it looks perfectly brand new. Like I paid the $5 in August. It looks the same. It looks the same again. He could probably use it next year if we had the same dates. I don't know how you guys feel about that, but that just is not how he organizes his thoughts. He rather do it digitally. He uses like a Google, and he has that's how his brain works, because they gave him a pen and paper and he doesn't like to do that. Now I'm kind of old school and I like to do checklists, and actually I like the feeling of writing my pen down to the paper, right? Like I like that, but some of our students might not. So but some of them might. So really giving them choice again. These are the resources we have. You're going to be able to use this when we leave high school, when we leave, when we get older. You get to decide how you organize things. But giving students options and choices is really helpful as a paraprofessional in the classroom, because I learn differently than Nikki does. So maybe she likes, I know that she likes pen and pencil, paper too, also. But some kids they don't, so they want to do everything virtually. So then that's okay. But those are some resources that we can support our students with. And I looked in the chat, and you guys kind of already did some of those. So thanks for that. Here's some more examples of resources. We talked about anchor charts, the one on the left. So that's an anchor chart in the classroom, just reminding students, okay, if you forgot how to do the multiplication, this is it in visual form, making sure that they have a reference to that in the lesson, showing them, or maybe teaching them to go look at the anchor charts before they ask the para for help. So instead of just going straight to the person, we're going to teach you, okay, before you come to me, you're going to have to look at the anchor chart. You're going to have to go back and look at your notes. And then if you still don't, and then maybe you're going to have to ask one other person. And if you don't know the answer still, then you're going to be able to come to me and then I can help you get that started, because we really are trying to get them to own some of that learning, that problem solving, and not just give them the answers, but really that problem solving process is, what could I do before I have to ask the adult for help? So I think that's a good way to kind of teach some of those things. You guys have to-do schedules. I had to do lists with my students. We would make up whatever they had to do that day, and they either checked it off or I had laminate sometimes. So any way that schedule looks for the student is helpful. A morning checklist with pictures and visuals is always helpful for students. What exactly am I doing in my workstation right now? I'm going to do this first work, second work, third work, and then I get a break, or whatever that looks like to you. These are example of resources you need. And Dr. Shelley Moore was talking about it. You need resources are things that you need, like you have to have access to the copy machine. I have to, if I'm the para or I'm the speech person, I'm in charge of making these lists. That is a resource because I have to go and make these things, these items. So that is an example of resources that all students can be a part of. Thanks, Gail. So now we're going to talk about an accommodation. So accommodations are support for a skill that is different from the skill being taught and assessed. That is Leanne Young. This is a picture of somebody, she is reading. So the skill is reading, and her glasses would be an accommodation, because we're not changing the skill of the reading. We're just helping her see the words, the letters with her glasses. So we're not we're not changing the level of complexity. So the glasses are an accommodation. Some other accommodations, which I think you guys we're going to talk about, but let's say a student has a hard time, they're distracted a lot. So I'm going to move them to a different part of the room. I did not change their worksheet. I did not change their work. I just moved them to another part of the room to get their distractions, to lessen their distractions. Maybe they're sitting by the window, so I had to move their seat. That's an accommodation. I had students in my class that were visually impaired. They had the same exact math worksheet as their neighbor, but I had to enlarge it. That would be an accommodation. We all have the same work, but I had to enlarge it because they weren't able to see it. Maybe I had to put it in a different color because of a visual impairment also. So maybe I used yellow paper because I know that that's the student can see better with. That's an accommodation. I didn't change any level of their work, the same level of complexity. They had to do everything the same as everybody else. I just helped them to access the material in the best way that they could. If you gave me trigonometry or calculus or really hard math, my glasses aren't going to help me, right? They're not going to help me. They're not going to help me do that math. So like in this picture, she puts on those glasses because that's an accommodation because she can't see the letters. That's not going to help her read better. It's just leveling it off to the playing field so that we're assessing the skill, which is reading. So that is an accommodation, not changing anything. It's not change. I always like to say it's not changing any level of complexity. All of the students have to do the same things. I'm just getting them what they need in order to complete that. Accommodations we're talking about are in students' IEPs, which we're going to talk about. So some students, we have to follow it, but some kids, we don't have to have an IEP for all accommodations. So for example, if a student needs glasses, things like that, that's an accommodation, but that doesn't have to be in their IEP. Or if you move a student because you noticed in their classroom that they're being distracted and you're moving them to accommodate them so that they can be less distracted, gen ed teachers can do that as well. But today we're talking about the accommodations that are in IEPs that we have to follow and what's the differences between an accommodation versus a modification. We're going to dig a little bit deeper into what exactly that looks like in our classroom on the next slide. And then I think there's some things in the chat that I haven't even looked. Okay. So again, accommodations are support and services provided to help a student across the general education curriculum and demonstrate learning, which I think I talked about. We're providing opportunities for students to demonstrate their learning. It does not change the instructional level, the content, or the standards. So if everybody has to provide a main idea and 2 details, then all of the students are going to have to do the same thing. But maybe some of the students might take a little bit longer. They need some extra time to finish the work. So, but it's the same exact standard. It's the same exact learning objective. Everybody has to get the same thing done. Maybe a couple students need extra time because they just process things differently. So that's in their IEP, but that is an accommodation. Some extra time to get that work done is not going to change the any of the work that they have to do. So that would be, yes, speech to text. Yes.
Yes, yeah.
Yes. Did you want to say something, Gail?
No, I was just reading the chat.
Okay, great. Yes, and then what accommodations do I need to provide to each student? So that's what we're going to ask ourselves. As you guys mentioned this before, it would be in the IEP at a glance. So if there's accommodations for your students, they would be set in there. As Gail said, that we should have access, and Nikki probably, I think earlier said, students have to have access to their accommodations in class, in math class, reading class, throughout their class, and also on their standardized tests if that's what it has in their IEP. I think Nikki or Gail, I can't remember, said the student should not just be able to, here you get a calculator because it's on your standardized test, but really we have to teach them how to use that calculator. That's their accommodation. The students know that they're able to use that as long, in class, and we have to show them how to practice with that so that they can use all of their accommodations or speech to text or their multiplication chart. We don't just give that to them. We have to actually have time to teach those accommodations to them so that they realize that those are their accommodations and they can ask for those when they need those. So I think that's a really important part of a paraprofessional, and the ones in my classroom really help me with that. These students are allowed to use this multiplication chart, but they really don't know how. That is a great, can you grab them for 5 minutes, for, a couple of students, and we can show them how to use it or refresh their memory on that every once in a while, because we sometimes assume that they just know how to use some of these accommodations, and really we need that brush up training, if you will. So accommodations, if you see in your classroom, you guys put some of them in your chat, but here are some accommodations that the students could use or could need. Again, I had students with visual impairments, so I did use colored paper or bigger paper, extended time calculator, speech to text, I think somebody brought up, bigger print, a number line, text to speech, you're talking and then it comes out like a co-writer, old school back in the day, doesn't have that anymore, but newer updated versions. Different seating. So if you're sitting, like I said, if a student's sitting by the window, they can't sit by the window or they can't sit in the back because of whichever reason, they might get distracted. A scribe. So maybe I don't have use of my hands, but I'm able to tell you the answer. I'm able to have a scribe. And that's an accommodation. Testing in small groups. I see that a lot in IEPs. You probably see that in IEPs. These students, maybe because they're distracted or they can't be in a large group when they test. So thinking about that, you have to pull them for that small group testing, whatever that may be. Maybe that's less than 5 students. Sometimes it's not in the IEP, but I think the more descriptive, the better sometimes. Read aloud directions, that would be an accommodation. The students have to do the same worksheet as everybody else. They get to have their tests read aloud. So it is an accommodation. Reducing the number of the same type problems. So if your standard is that you want to see if the students are able to complete multiplication problems, and maybe a teacher gives a student 25 multiplication, all the students 25 multiplication problems, but you have that you can reduce the number of the same type problems in the IEP, then maybe your student only has to do 10. That is an accommodation because they have to do the same complexity, meaning they have to show the teacher that they can complete multiplication. They don't have to do as many. So the teacher can see if they know the skill of multiplication by only doing 10 and not by doing 25. So that is an accommodation. It's not changing any level of complexity. Now, if a student has multiplication, division, subtraction, all of those different things on their worksheet, and the teacher says you can only have to do one type, that's different, and Gail's going to get into that. But if everybody is the same type of problem and you're going to reduce the amount of work they have, that could be in the IEP. That is an accommodation that we've seen in IEPs, as long as the case conference committee decides that is what the student needs. And that could be an accommodation. And if there's any more, you guys can throw those in the chat, or if there's any that you see now, or any ahas, please put those in the chat. But I just wanted to go through what accommodations you could see. Accommodations should be tailored to fit the individual needs. The team decides what accommodations are needed for students. So the case conference committee, that's what CCC means. If you don't know what that means, that's just the team around the students that are at the IEP meetings. So you may or may not be there, but I just wanted to explain what that was. Students should know their accommodations and how to ask for them. So students really should be in on it, like, okay, these are your accommodations. As a parent, this is a great place for you to be. You look at the IEP at a glance, you know the students' accommodations. You can say, okay, I see that you have Snap and Read on your IEP. Do you know how to pull that up? Do you have an extension for it? Do you need any practice with it? Can we go and dive a little deeper into that? Because I do think that sometimes there are accommodations on IEPs, and then students are like, yeah, I have that, but I don't really know how to access that, or maybe I need some more practice with those things. But I think this is a great place for paraprofessionals to help, is with these accommodations.
And I will also say, I'm just going to interject that if you notice that a student is never using an accommodation, you should probably bring that to the teacher of record's attention, because if the student isn't going to use it or doesn't like it, or for whatever reason, then it doesn't really need to be in their IEP. And the other thing I would say is, those of you that are elementary paras, if you could help, like Alana said, teach students what their accommodations are and how to ask for them, so that they're in a class, they can say, hey, I need a calculator, or, I need to make sure that the speech to text is working. Because if we teach them in elementary school, if you wait till middle school or high school, we all know middle school kids aren't always polite. So if we teach them how in elementary school, they just get used to it, and they get used to the kind of language to use to ask for those things.
Absolutely, I agree. Yep. And then I think you'll talk about that after the modifications. I think about you could keep the data, and so then when the teacher asks if the students are using the accommodations, the pairs will be a really great resource to say if they are or not, or if you've noticed that. So for sure, I think that's great advice. All right, you can move on, Gail.
All right, so next. So we're going to talk about modifications, which are different than the accommodations, because with a modification, you are actually changing something about the instruction. Oh yeah, Sarah, you can remove accommodations if they don't need them. I'm just going to answer to the chat. You shouldn't have the same accommodations necessarily from beginning to end. I will admit it, as an administrator, if students like third graders that are new to testing, I would oftentimes err on the side of caution and give more accommodations. And sometimes when they went from like middle school to high school, I would give more accommodations, just because you want to give as much support as you can. But if a student doesn't use one, or if a student says, hey, I really need extra time, you can add to it too. So it should always be a conversation at the case conference. But as Alana said, the difference between accommodations and what we're going to talk about now, modifications, is an accommodation doesn't change the things that are being studied, where a modification does. Why doesn't it move now? Can you move me, Alana? Yeah, okay. So modifications change the content and the required work, or the instructional level. If you're reading, Huckleberry Finn, and you're in 9th grade, you might read an easier version of Huckleberry Finn, maybe the 5th grade version of Huckleberry Finn, because you can't read well enough to read the high school level. So it's changing the instructional level. Like Alana gave the example of math. In math, if you're doing a multiplication and division, but you just cannot, you're still working on multiplication, then you have changed it. If everybody else is doing both types of problems and you're only doing one type, you have modified what they are doing. Sometimes it's just too hard, but because we try to put students in the least restrictive environment and they can listen and get as much as they can out of it, but what they are required to do as an assignment is not going to be the same as everybody else. And again, this is going to be a case conference decision. Normally, students that have modifications are students that are not on diploma track. Because obviously, if you need to get a diploma, you need to do the same tasks as everybody else. So that is the difference between a modification and an accommodation. Does anybody have any questions? Okay. Okay, move. All right, so here's some examples. And if you see other modifications, just put it in the chat. So it might be that you have extended time in a fluency reading passage. It's going to take you longer, so you're going to get more time. You're going to complete part of the learning objective because you do not have the skill to complete the whole thing. Maybe you do a different project. So if everybody else is writing 3 or 4 paragraphs, you're going to write some sentences. So you are changing what everybody else is doing, or what you are doing as opposed to what everybody else is doing. And then the example of the addition problems when others are adding and subtracting. So, yeah.
Can I add a quick minute about fluency, Gail? Do you mind if I address that for
Oh, go ahead.
Okay. So I wanted to point out here the big difference between extended time is an accommodation that's used often. I saw that mentioned in the chat. Extended time is an accommodation that's used often at all grade levels. And you see it listed here specifically in a fluency reading passage, because when we're talking about fluency, the amount of time that it takes you to read, fluency is the flow of how we read aloud, and the amount of time it takes you to read is part of the test. So because it's specifically part of the test, giving extra time does modify the expectation for all students. So much like our students who wear glasses, and so that doesn't change their curriculum at all, but at the eye doctor, if you're at the eye doctor, your glasses change what's being tested. And so that's a modification that you would use when you're at the eye doctor if they're testing your vision. Same thing with that fluency passage. While extended time is a common accommodation, it is a modification when it comes to something like a fluency reading passage. So that conversation is really important. Those of you who are paras who are working on that fluency piece with your students, it is important conversation to have with your teacher of record to make sure you understand the expectations for that student when it comes to those fluency passages. Sorry, Gail. Thank you.
That's okay. Absolutely.
I was going to also add, just like those time math tests, that would be the same thing. So if the teacher has a time math test, you only could do a certain amount of math, because I've seen that before in elementary. Like you have to do as many problems as you can in 1 minute, and they give you a grade, or they give you a score. It would be the same thing. If you have extended time on that, that is changing. That's a modification, because they're trying to do how fast you're doing it. So it's the skill. So again, I'm just trying to give an example for math, and Nikki gave one in reading. So thanks.
Okay, so Leslie, we are still on diploma track. Well, you can still be on diploma track, but if you are modifying everything, it is going to take you a lot longer because you're not doing the same thing as everybody else. So.
Correct, but many parents at the elementary level aren't ready yet to take their child off diploma track. And there is simply no way the child can complete all the work, especially in the area of their specific learning disability.
Well, again, for little
so
kids,
we do have modifications
for those kids, the little kids that are on diploma. That's
so
okay.
We do have.
Again, I would never put a kid on not a diploma track when they were in elementary school necessarily, unless they were severely disabled, because you just never know. And I would give kids as much
Correct. We have
opportunity
one
as
student and
possible.
yeah, one student in our school is not on diploma track, but we have multiple students with modifications just so they can get, you know, if the whole class is doing double digit multiplication, they might just still be doing single digit multiplication at this time in the year, that kind of thing. So I don't know, I was a little shocked when you said that because many of our IEPs have modifications in them. And I didn't know if that was a legal guideline.
No, it is. I mean,
or-
you can do that, but if you think about it, you absolutely can do that. It's a case conference decision. The problem comes
Okay.
is, as you can see, when a student, as they age and they're always behind, they aren't going to be able to have the level of knowledge that other kids have, and it is going to be a harder row for them once they are working on credits. But again, in high school, if it takes you 2 times to get a credit, an algebra credit, it takes you 2 years to get an algebra credit, right? Because it takes you longer to learn the material. So it's totally legal. It's a case
Okay.
conference decision, but
Okay.
if you're modifying something, you're always going to be catching up,
Correct.
correct?
Yes.
Right?
Thank you.
Right. So the other thing is sometimes you can be graded differently, like students might be on a pass-fail as opposed to a grade. That would then be different than their peers. The modifications, again, in high school, it's more difficult, but again, in high school, the rules are a little different because if you know, you're in 4th grade, you're in 4th grade, you're in 5th grade, you're in 5th grade. In high school, if it takes you longer, takes you longer. So that is not unusual to have different grade levels in a class in a high school that you're not going to have in an elementary school. Is there any other questions? You just need to be careful with, again, with the modifications, thinking about it because, again, it's different than what everybody else is doing. Okay. Now, flip me. Now we're going to do our poll, Alana. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a poll for you. So you're going to say, is it an accommodation, modification, or support or resource? So there you go.
Just accommodation or modification. We're just doing accommodation or modification. Yep.
Oh, right.
Did you guys see it? I've launched the poll.
Can you guys see it?
Yes.
Okay.
You guys, we hopefully we're good teachers. We're gonna see.
Hopefully. There's 5, I think 5 questions, right? So,
Yes.
okay. How many people do we have altogether?
49 and about 24 have answered, so it's awesome.
Right.
Can you see the answers and everything, Gail? I'm just making sure.
Um,
I can go through it too if you need me to.
I can, yeah, I can see the answers.
Let me know when you're ready for me to move forward and I'll move us through the slides.
So I'll give everybody a couple more minutes. It's fun to watch the little blue line go up and down.
This is the first time we use the poll in these sessions, so. I like the chat.
Yeah, almost everybody. We're getting there.
Rachel said she only saw 2 questions. You should be able to scroll down if you can't see it, but it's okay if not, Rachel. I'm sorry about that.
Oh, yeah.
Should be able to scroll.
You should be able to scroll on the right side. It should scroll up and down.
Well, that's okay. It's if you didn't see it. We're going to go over the answer. Gail's going to go over the answers. Everybody, nobody fails. Just for fun, just for learning.
Yep. Just for learning. And sometimes I'll just talk while we're finishing up, but sometimes some accommodations, like I know Lana said earlier, we teach everybody. You teach everybody how to use a calculator. I mean, that's just a skill that kids learn in school. All kids learn how to use it. And, you know, Alana might never need to use a calculator or use it sparingly, where if I have an IEP and accommodation is a calculator, I might need to use it all the time because I just cannot remember the multiplication facts. I understand multiplication, but I just can't remember the facts. So I can do higher level math because I can understand it, but I just need to use a calculator. Voice to text is another one that everybody can use. And it is a learning curve because you still have to use punctuation, capitalization, and those kinds of things, which we all know when we do voice messages on our phones, how it doesn't always come out the way you think. All right, should we stop? Or we still got a few?
No, I think we're good. We can.
Okay, can you end? Oh, can I end it?
Yeah. I can end it too if you want.
Okay, did it share the results?
Did you press
Okay.
share results?
Huh?
Did you press share results?
Yeah, stop
Oh.
sharing. Share results. Can you see it?
Yeah, yes.
Okay, so we'll just go over them one by one. So a student able to use a calculator, that would be, and
They have the slides. We have the slides in there. They have the answer.
oh yeah, so wait, hold on. Oh, here we are. Okay, so extended time, it is an accommodation. Because it doesn't change anything. It just gives you more time. Doesn't change what you do. Okay. The one thing I will say about extended.
Shout out to those of you who called it a modification thinking it was fluency. So I'm guessing my elementary people who regularly do fluency exams or the rocket math Alana was talking about, maybe you were picturing that. I did see a bit of an uptick in that one with modifications, but again, extended time is an accommodation most of the time, unless you're doing a specifically timed
Right.
assignment. Like,
and the other thing I will say about extended time is, especially when you get into the upper grades, there should be like a specific amount of extended time in the IEP or at the IEP at a glance. So like time and a half or a day or whatever it is that they've written in there, because the problem can become as you get older. Like if I give you an extra 2 days to do an assignment, that might be fine for an elementary student, but it's always going to make you behind when you get to middle school and high school. So just need to watch to see how much extra time, extended time is given. Okay, next. Completing only addition problems on an addition and subtraction assignment. That would be a modification. Because again, you're not doing the same thing as everybody else. You are only doing addition. Everybody else is doing subtraction. So you have changed what the focus of the class is. All right. Sitting near the whiteboard. That would be an accommodation. Because you're going to do the same thing as everybody else, but maybe like Alana with her students that had a visual impairment, you have to sit closer, otherwise you can't see it. Or it just keeps the distraction away if you're sitting up close to where the teacher is instructing. You would need to sit close, but it doesn't change what you're doing. So that would be an accommodation. Using a calculator, another accommodation. Again, if you understand what a multiplication is and you just can't remember those facts, you're going to be trying to learn the facts for the rest of your life. You use a calculator, you can do some higher level math, just need to use a calculator. Completing only one part of the learning objective. That would be a modification because you're only doing part of whatever has been assigned. So you're not doing the same thing as everybody else, therefore it's modified. Good job, everybody. I'm sorry you couldn't put your answers in. It's a work in progress. All right, so here's a scenario. There is a student who is eligible for special education services. He has a hard time remembering to submit his work after it is complete. The student is easily distracted when the teacher is talking in front of the room. Also, the student needs help remembering steps to math problems. When he is stuck on a problem, he will shut down and not ask for help. The student can complete work, but it takes him a long time to finish all of the problems. So in the chat, what are some accommodations or resources this student could use? Yep, extended time. Yep, extra time. Anybody else? A visual to submit and a visual steps to a problem, an anchor chart, visual to submit work, extra time. Visuals. Yes, it is clear that to some sort of executive functioning skills that are lacking because he can't remember to submit his work after it's completed. You've all had those students where you see them working and where does it go? A checklist, a folder. I've seen little kids write that has a folder, do and done, so they know where to put it. Oh, good, the student can have less problems. The student needs to complete a percentage of the problems. Good job. Any more? Reduced work. Yep, as long as you keep it this, you can make fewer problems. More time, fewer problems.
The part, Gail, that when he's stuck on a problem, he will shut down and not ask for help. So also thinking about how do we want to, how can we have him teach him how to ask for help, or what could we do to teach that part of that executive functioning too? So there's a lot of things that you could help the student with, like you said, just submitting the work, but also if he gets stuck, what could he do to help you? I've seen a lot of times when there's a card, you teach a kid to have a card, it's green if they're good to go and it's red if you need help, because maybe they're embarrassed, they don't want to like raise their hand or to put, to do anything in front of student or to ask questions in front of kids, especially in middle school. So if they have something small, like a little thing, maybe that could be helpful, like a nonverbal thing that they could use, or
right. And the other thing about the shutting down and not asking for help, that asking a question is is a skill in itself that you can help kids with, because first of all, they have to know what their question is, and then they have to know, like, who do they ask? When do they ask? Are they supposed to ask their neighbor first? Are they supposed to ask, when do they ask the teacher? But just being able to understand what their question is and being able to listen to what kind of questions other students are asking to see if their question is answered. But asking questions is a skill that we sometimes don't realize is more difficult than we imagine. All right, good job, everybody. Okay, next. So what are your questions? No, there's no silly questions. Every question is a good question. So what questions do you have about accommodations and modifications?
Well, I saw something in the chat. I think that maybe we could address to everybody, that it said, what happens when your student doesn't want to use the accommodations, maybe a read aloud on a test, or they're just like, I don't want it. Like I've seen that too. Okay, come with me, you get your test read aloud, or if they know that they do or whatever. No, I don't want that. I don't want to, I don't need it, or whatever they say. And I think that was a great question, because of course it's in your IEP, so they are supposed to get it. But if they don't want it, or they say they don't need it, what do you do? So I gave the advice, and I think Nikki put it in the chat also, just to make sure as a para that you're documenting that when they say that, how often they're saying that. The teacher could look at the data to see how they're doing without it getting read, just so that if maybe they don't need the accommodation, I'm not sure, but you can't force that. Of course, sometimes, I taught in middle school. It's hard to force them to use their accommodations if they don't want to. They get them, but of course, you're trying to do what the best you can with students, but if you don't want also to get in a fight about it or anything like that. But sometimes it's helpful that maybe all kids that, if they have an IEP or not, can read the directions aloud, as long as it's not a comprehension part, just, the directions. I'm just going to read the directions to everybody, so that I know some of those students, so they don't feel like they're getting singled out. Maybe that could be part of it. I'm not sure. But that is something that could happen. You could also, I just said, document it and make sure you talk with a teacher of record to see if it's happening in every class. Is it just happening in reading class about the accommodation? Because when we have that meeting, we want to say, are they using it? How often are they using it? Like Gail said, if they're not using it, should we change it to something different? Could they, instead of me reading it aloud, read it on the computer can read it to them with the headphones, so it doesn't look like I'm doing it as a person. So there's a lot of different options there, but I just wanted to kind of talk about that out loud.
Yeah, so the question is, do all modifications need approved by a licensed teacher? Yes, you cannot modify the work. You can report to a teacher how the student is doing if you're with them, but all the modifications are going to be made by the teacher of record, according to the information that they have, and that's going to be decided in the case conference. So you can report what you see, but you can't do the modifying yourselves. That's a good question, though.
Our elementary friends, some of those modifications happen, I think, naturally as part of just the tier 1 setting. When I was teaching first grade, the students are so different that we'd be making changes, pretty often, just to help get them to the next day's lesson, to get, throughout for all of our students, whether they had an IEP or not. But as students get older, it's really important to note that those modifications can take them off of diploma track. So when they're in high school and it's 4 credits in diploma track, even small modifications might impact that. So it's important, to make sure that any modification at all levels go through the teacher of record, and then eventually would go through a case conference. Yeah, thank you. That's a great question.
Yeah. What about eliminating multiple choice options from 4 to 2? Yeah, you can eliminate multiple choice options, but again, you don't want to do it so that it's a modifying what the questions are asking. So that becomes a little harder, because if you go from 4 to 2, are you giving them the answer? You don't want to do that. So what I used to do is I would just eliminate that all or none and actually give them 4 answers, because I found that more confusing.
In trainings, I'm going to steal Alana's example here. Alana always gives this example in trainings. She regularly tells teachers, if you have to know for sure that students need that. So we can't just say all of our students with IEPs, we're always going to cross off one of those options. And so what we have to think about is, what would the goal of going from 4 to 2 actually, what would that change for the student? So is it addressing distractions? Is it addressing the content? So you have to really think about the purpose of cutting one of those options and then make the decision for, of course, with your teacher of record, obviously, right? But always making sure that you know the reason why you would do that, not just always cutting off to whether we know if they can do it or not. So having the data to support those decisions.
Right. And yes, you can work if you, well, I would not pull students like to a special ed room, but if you're in a room and you're working with a group of students, it could be a mixed group of special ed and gen ed students. And if you're doing math, yeah, you can be, like I said, if you're all using calculators, some of the kids might not need to use it. If you're doing a task with a group of kids, because they've got those multiplication tables memorized, or littler kids, they can add, they don't need the manipulatives, but another kid in the group might need to use those things. They're still doing the same problem. So yes, you can have a mix of students with IEPs and without IEPs. Oh, I was going to say something from your comment, Nikki. I don't remember what it was. So, yeah.
We love that you all share your questions here at the end. We designed the training to end at about the 1 hour mark so that we had that 30 minutes left here at the end to make sure we had time to answer your questions, because we know the setting that each of you is in is so different around the state. Some of you are, around being in different places around the state, being in different grade levels and having different needs of the students. So we know that you need this individualized support time. So we will continue to answer questions as long as you all are here in the Zoom, and you also can reach out to us after as well if you'd like. But I am going to go ahead. Give me a thumbs up, Alana and Gail? Are you okay if I move to the next? So
and I was going to say the other reason. Let me just add that the other important reason for you to know the accommodations and modifications of the students that you help is because a student, even the smallest student, will play you and they will say, well, you have to read it to me. And if that is not their accommodation, no, you don't. But if you don't know what the accommodations are, then you're stuck between that student and reading it to them. So it is really important that you understand what their accommodations and modifications are so that you can make sure that they get the right thing.
Yes, that was another great question that was addressed in the chat today while we were talking, was about where would we get a copy of the IEP at a glance. And the IEP at a glance is, covered by the FERPA and confidentiality. So you would want to get that directly from your teacher of record. Your schools all have different policies for that. I heard some of you in the chat mention it's in a binder. It stays in the teacher of record's room. Others of you are able to have a copy of it. But what's important to know is that you are able to see the information in there. So you will have access to that because you work directly with that student. So that's important to know as well. On the screen here, we have on our left side is our evaluation. If you would be willing to scan the QR code, or we'll throw it here in the chat in just a second. Fill out our online evaluation that covers today's session. On the right side, you see a link that will take you directly to our website. So we encourage you to interact with our website. We have lots of recorded trainings on there if you're interested in learning more or digging deeper into any of these, as well as lots of Padlets and different compilations of resources that you may find beneficial in your classroom or working with students. The best thing there is that you can use the site to contact any of us if you have additional questions or need some personalized attention in your classroom, working with your specific students.
And so the question about you're on your phone, again, when Rosalind sends you your certificate, it will come with a link. So if you can't do it now, when you get your certificate, there'll be a link for the evaluation in the email.
Yep. I was
All
gonna say
right.
the same thing. Yeah, please don't pull over. You guys, yeah, if you're listening while you're driving, be safe. You don't have to, just listen and then you can get the information later. No problem.
Yeah,
Thank you.
and it will be as soon as Dale gets it all uploaded. So it might be day after tomorrow, but you will get it.
Thank you guys. I love this group. You guys are very interactive. You have great questions. You have great comments, and you can tell that you're doing great things in your classroom just by all of the accommodations that you say that's going on right now. I think hopefully that you know what a difference between an accommodation and a modification is, and that we see that you do because we saw the poll, so we had some feedback from that. So that's very helpful for us to see as you are that you can say, you know, I know the difference between these two things, and get some ideas of how to use them. Hopefully that's what you got today out of this training, and that you can confirm that you're doing all great things. So we hope that that is it. And then there's some things in the chat that are just saying thanks. So, but if you have any more questions, we will be on for a few more minutes to help you for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you for being with us here on St. Patrick's Day. We hope that you
Yes.
enjoy your afternoon. Go find a leprechaun.
Yeah.
My
Find that
daughter's wondering where ours
gold.
was.
Find that pot of gold.
If I do, I won't see you guys in the next lesson and the next session. So bye. It was good to see you. If I find some pot of gold tonight. This will be my last one, but I probably will be back because I probably won't find anything.
Oh, I'm glad you learned a lot.
That's awesome.
That's what we like to hear.
Which has a question. No. Rachel, is it okay if I say it out loud, or do you want me just to write you back? I can write you back separately. Because we can brainstorm this one out. Somebody's having a hard time with their one-to-one student focusing, and when the teacher's giving instruction, when it comes to completing the task, they immediately say they don't know what happened. Like they don't know what so it sounds like executive functioning skills. So they probably need some help with that. I guess we'd have to know like what they're doing instead, right?
Alana, I was typing an answer to another question that was in the chat. Can you say that again? I'm so sorry.
No, I'm direct. She was directed messaging me, so I wasn't sure. When the teacher's giving directions, the student is not focused and then immediately doesn't know what to do, is basically the question. So she's trying to figure out how to help with that.
I would give the sample as a gen ed teacher. I would sometimes have certain students who would have a sticky note on their desk, and as I was giving directions, they would like say in their minds 1, 2, 3, and I would always tell them up front. I would do some front loading. I give directions in chunks of 3. 1, 2, 3. Those are the only. You're never going to get 7 directions in a row from me. I'm going to say 3. So as fast as you can, draw a quick emoji. When you hear me say first, you will do this. Draw a quick picture, emoji, 1-word reminder. That gives them that front load that helps them, key into those directions. That's one idea. I was in middle school. That was kind of a really big deal for me with sixth graders, I found, because every teacher on their schedule did it so differently. That something to kind of, it was a struggle there. So that was something that I used.
I was going to say the same thing. Have them write down specifically something that specifically something as the teacher's talking, if they have to write down something, and whatever you're going to teach them how to do it, because I'm not sure how the teacher gives the directions, because it's probably, I'm not sure how that would be. But if the teacher gives the directions, kind of having what Nikki just said, they have to write something down while the teacher is talking. whatever that is, the first thing, like you said, 1, 2, 3, first thing you're going to do is this. At least and start with one thing, like turn to page 24, whatever, and the student has to write down the first thing and then the second thing to get them, because they said that they're kind of staring off into space, they're not really paying attention. But she said it was a student that's able to do that. So I think the writing and the brain connection needs to probably be the first thing that happens. Don't you think, Nikki? That would be maybe the first thing that I would say.
I do. I also found that printing slides for students, it was hard to always make something extra for students, but once I started using slides, if I just had a printed out copy ahead of time of what we were going to do, especially for a longer direct instruction session. So if you're talking about not just 3 instructions for something, but if you're talking about, like, say, a 6 to 8 minute block of direct instruction on content, I would make sure that that student had a printed copy of the slides, or even a digital copy now. At the time, my students weren't one-to-one, the example I'm thinking of, but then the students on the slides could draw or write a quick note. And then if they needed, when direct instruction ended, they would then have this resource right there ready to go. They wouldn't have to rely on an adult to repeat it all. So just really, supporting.
Yeah, I would do that too. When we would do writing assignments, I would, like, if it was Halloween, I had an overhead. So on the overhead, I would have all the kids shout out words. I would be writing them up there, and most of the kids then could just use the list that was being projected. But for some kids, I actually would go and print the list, so they had one at their desk so they could cross off words, so they could figure out which words they wanted, and they didn't have to keep looking up and down to the board. It was easier for them to do that. They just needed the paper.
Hey,
That's all the
Alana.
strategies, Rachel, hopefully, and then and we can give more ideas, and I can think about more ideas.
Can I throw out my idea?
Yes, Katie, please.
Absolutely.
Just from my lens, my idea is, what is the barrier? Like, clearly there is some barrier, but is it a barrier within the student? Is it a barrier within the environment? Is it a barrier of the student knows that they don't have to pay attention and someone's going to be right there to help them anyway? And I think when you can identify the barrier, then you can better implement a strategy to support the deficit.
That's good. Good point, Katie.
Yeah, that's a great advice. So maybe observing and see that part first, Rachel, and then we can think about a strategy. Oh, and then when the student just wants to be finished with something, like rushes through something, do you mean?
I know I've seen that in particular with my students who are that kind of twice exceptional, where they have some executive function deficits, but they are content-wise very, very intelligent and have those higher IQs. And so they know it and they just want to keep moving, and they never want to stop and hear, what the teacher has to say. I already know everything I need to know about English. I don't need to know where any more commas go. And so you have it. So I would always find that I had to build in purpose for that. Sometimes it was that those students would need to be able to give 3 examples, or 3 is a lot, but give some examples to help teach someone else. So I know that you know it, but as I'm talking, can you make sure that you're, on this, so that when I'm done, you can turn and talk and tell your neighbor 3 ways of doing that, or give your neighbor, so that that builds that purpose. Because one of the things, again, especially the student I'm picturing, felt that they knew it, but also when they would try to turn and talk and teach it to someone else, saw that that was a struggle. So that was something that worked with not just needing to rush through, but how am I going to teach this to someone else? Might be something that could work there to help slow that student down just a little bit.
I like that, Nick. Good. And we'll keep thinking, we'll keep brainstorming because we know kids are individual. We have to figure out their strengths and what we
Did
can.
she say how old the kiddo was?
No.
Rachel, how old is the kid? What age group do you have? Fifth
Yeah.
grade.
Mhm.
I spend so much time with those fifth and sixth graders. Those are my people. And I know what you mean about trying to get them to slow down. I think anytime you can add in something to give it purpose, again, teaching others, creating an emoji, especially if you have a student who has some pretty
Mhm.
specific interests, I guess, is what I'm thinking of. So if it's a student who loves art or who loves music, or I think you could always find a way. I had a student who made a rap song for us one time because he was definitely sick of hearing me talk about persuasive writing. But then he came up with a little 20-second commercial that was a little rap song about the elements of persuasive writing. And so you really can find some different ways to motivate them. So if when needed, if you knew that that student wasn't going to attend to that, give them that different thing up front. And that way, especially if it's a student who's not a behavior problem, it gives
Who
them,
wants to be independent next year, according to Rachel?
yeah, yeah, so we have to put those supports in place so that they can kind of know up front. And maybe that does mean instead of having a one-to-one para, maybe next year you want to be independent. So then how do you ask the teacher for something you can do while they're talking so that you can be ready for the next step? And so teaching that advocacy as well for how they can ask for those thinking points while the teachers, before it starts.
Right. And I used to work with my kids on saying, well, what does help? What does help you? Like, these are all different. You can have all different kinds of accommodations. Because I had middle school. So it was like, I felt like they could tell me what works and what doesn't. If you're never going to use this, we'll take it away. But we still have to get stuff done. So what's going to help you? So when they start having that conversation, once you get that rapport with them, I had kids that would actually tell me why or why not, and we could have a discussion about different accommodations. Working on that independence.
And if that student is motivated to be independent, I think that really is a big part of the battle. Like, you'll start seeing that it's not, if they're motivated to be independent and they're verbalizing that, you're likely to see, okay, we're going to see fewer behaviors, we're going to see more attention to whatever's happening. Those are some things to keep in mind.
That's good, Rachel. Yeah, I agree. If they're facing the window, they might be daydreaming. You move the seat. That's a great idea. That is a great idea.
They just want to be outside.
I love the chat. They had great questions and we had to think. We had to use our brains. It was awesome. Thank you.
Yep.
I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my slides.
All right. Yep. Have a great day too. Thanks, guys. That was a
Thanks,
good...
everybody.
Thank you, Katie, for
thanks for your input.
All right. We'll see you guys later.
I'll figure it out.
Happy St. Pat's.
Bye, guys.
Take care, everyone.